Welcome to Connection Requested. This is Season 2. And Season 2 has not started on January 2022. It has now started on May 2024. But connection's still needed, just as much as it was back then, in the old days of Season 1. I tell you that because I'm a big fan of the truth. And the truth, well, like life, it's messy. So, in case you're new to this podcast, or it's been 2 years since you last heard one of these episodes, let me explain what it's all about. I'm your host, Mark Tweddle, co-founder of youtellyours.com. I started this podcast because I rarely know the people who request to connect to me on LinkedIn. Whether it's Facebook friends, LinkedIn connections, followers on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, X, whatever it's called, it doesn't really matter. They never seem to provide the kind of meaningful connections that I seek in my life. And so this podcast is to show how simple stories can produce those connections. At some point in the future, I'll also bring on board my business partner, Lynn Ferguson. She's also my wife. We run youtellyours.com together, and it's all about story and connection. Be that connection with yourself, with your writing, or with others. In fact, our guest mentions Lynn a couple of times in this episode. So I'm going to stop wittering on and get started with this week's guest. It's Chesney Hawkes, a singer, musician, and good friend of mine. Let's start. 2 minutes. Tell us the story of your name, and I'll put the timer up.
Okay.
You ready?
I am. My name is Chesney Hawkes. Chesney's an odd name because I don't know any other Chesneys. I did meet one Chesney, actually, a black page 3 girl, and it wasn't her actual name. It was a nickname. So it comes from my father. His father was a big fan of a guy called Chesney Allen, who was a singer and comedian with a group called the Crazy Gang. Bud Flanagan and Chesney Allen were the two kind of main guys. They were like a duo. They actually had hit records, I think through like the 40s and 50s maybe. They're kind of vaudeville, weren't they, in a way? And so the big hit record they had was Underneath the Arches. My whole life, Chesney has been, a different. And so I think it helps in what I do because people remember my name because, it's a different name. I mean, I get from when I travel to different countries, they always, pronounce it wrong. Like in Germany, it's Chesney. Chesney Hawkes. I've had that when I'm going through passport control and they look at my control, Chesney Hawkes. I'm like, yes, that's me. I have a middle name, Lee, which I think is kind of just, a little bit normal in a way. In the middle there, it makes me sound like a country, Chesney Lee, like something like that. But I actually really like my name. I think it's kind of got rock star connotations for some reason. It just kind of, Lynn always says, that's your lovely wife, Lynn always says it's about the plosives, and plosives are those little how do you explain what a plosive is? It's the k and the h and the s. So if you've got more of those, apparently plosives are more memorable. So there you go, there's my name, Chesney Hawkes.
Chesney Hawkes.
Or Chesney Hawkes.
Sounds like Dukes and Hazzard. Thank you so much for doing that. I like that. I did not know that. That's kind of fun as well. There's nothing about you that's not music.
No, it's all music, mate. It's all music. It
all
doesn't
music
have my name has rhythm.
Yeah, that's why I remember Lynn saying about the plosives in your name, and that's why sometimes people will use you or your name for jokes and things like that.
Yeah, I'm like a punchline.
It kind of ends it. It's like Chesney Hawkes. I always want to pronounce it kind of Chesney Hawkes.
Yeah, I
know. Some kind of put on some sort of London accent to it.
You do it very often. I've noticed that. Yes.
Yeah, I love the sound of it. I really do.
Chesney
it's
Hawkes.
Not in a kind of diminutive way, just in a kind of It's
it just works.
Part of my love for London, I guess. Maybe that's why I like it.
You know what Lynn was saying about the plosives and the fact that, like, certain words are more pleasing to the ear or funnier to the ear. Like sausages is a funny word, but breakfast is not a funny word. And I guess, Nigel Smith is not particularly funny or nice to hear in your ears. I don't know, but Chesney Hawkes kind of has those things. I don't know. It's very interesting.
Yeah, the whole sound, why does it affect us the way it does?
Yeah.
But then sound really affects us, because I don't know if you've done that thing of listening to, I've forgotten the name of them, binaural beats and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah,
where
binaural
you can
beats.
listen to music that will help you, binaural beats that will help you study or concentrate or focus or relax.
Yeah.
If sound can do it like that, then obviously the sound of a name will affect you.
Of course, yeah. No, there's certain frequencies that do different things in your body, apparently, and resonate with different parts of your body. I did recordings of different sound bowls, the things that people use in meditations, and I made sure that they were specifically tuned to the specific frequencies, and then you put those together and they do all sorts of things to the way the sound waves in your mind works. It's so interesting. I love all that.
Yeah, that's definitely a kind of wormhole of knowledge and internet searches that it is scary to me. Like, I know that's like something you'd never come out of alive. Do you know what I mean? That would be a subject that would just keep on giving.
Yeah, I went down that rabbit hole a little bit, and then when it got too scientific, I was like, all right, I'm just going to pick up a guitar now.
Yeah, right. So next story, right? If you're ready, is the story is my first job. So I just give you the beginning, my first job, and then you just go into that, and you can go anywhere you want as normal. It could be my first job was not very interesting, so I'll tell you about my second job. Whatever you want to do.
Okay.
Yeah?
Okay.
It wouldn't surprise me if your first job was music. But let's just see. So are you ready?
Yes. My first job was a paperboy. I was 14. I mean, you preempted it saying that you wouldn't be surprised if my first job was music. It probably was, but I would say my first job that I got paid was as paperboy, and I actually really loved it. But it was the only job in my whole life since that wasn't music involved. I made a record when I was 9 years old, but I can't really call that a job. It's too much fun. I think Roger Daltrey once said to me, clang, did you hear that? He said, fancy getting paid for what you love doing. And, that's what I've done my whole life, music is still my absolute waking thoughts. So since my job as a paperboy, I've carried on with different things in music. I mean, obviously I'm a singer, and I'm a performer, I'm a writer, I'm a producer, but it's all to do with music. One thing about my paperboy job that was quite interesting and noteworthy is that I was Billy Ocean's paperboy. He was a very good tipper. Christmases were good from Billy Ocean. He lived in the next road along from where I used to live as a kid. And it's funny because now I know Billy from doing big gigs, festivals, the 80s crowd. And I always hook up with him, and he always mentions the fact that I was his paperboy. I love it. So yeah, I have loved all the jobs that I've done so far. I really do feel like that since the pandemic, that perhaps I should have diversified in what I do for a living, because obviously I couldn't earn a living through the pandemic because all of my money came from live performances, which is my main job. Since the pandemic hit, I feel like I have had to diversify a little bit, but I've never really wanted to move away from music. It's something that I could have done. I mean, even the other things that would be open to me, like perhaps working in a record company, is still music, isn't it? I just can't get away from it. I love it too much, Mark.
Cool. That's great. I remember you saying about playing piano in a pub at one point, and I was like, I wonder if that was his first job.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it was around the same time, because I was 14 when I started playing, 14, 15, I guess, when I started doing little piano gigs in local pubs and things like that. But I think the paper round probably preceded it, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Wasn't those Sunday supplements, was it?
It was. And I lived in a place called Sunningdale, which is kind of a very wealthy area. Like, there was the Wentworth Estate, which is where the Wentworth Golf Club is, and you can imagine the Sundays were a nightmare. The biggest, like, every paper was like as thick as as thick as a brick, you know.
The civil service college is in Sunningdale, so I know what Sunningdale's like. So
Yeah.
was it not like large distances between each house? And
It
stuff
was,
like that
it
as
was,
well?
yeah. The Wentworth Estate is like a mile between each house, and I had to go back to the shop to pick up the other papers because there's no way I could carry all the Sunday papers for all these places. Or most of those houses would take every single big paper, you know, all the broadsheets. And so anyway, you see, it's hard work.
This podcast is all about connection, and that's my obsession. And it started from trying to figure out why on earth it was on LinkedIn that strangers would connect to me, sometimes without even a message or just some sort of cold, hi, thought we should connect. And you don't know the person, you don't have any mutual contacts, and I had no idea, like, why would you do that? Because it's not really a connection. It's just a kind of data point that you've agreed to something. But what I'm interested from you is, like, I know how story connects, but music connects, and it connects in a different way. I wondered what your kind of perspective of that was. Is that what you get out of music, or do you get something else out of music?
Songs are stories in a way. I mean, some of them really are literally narrative stories, aren't they? So, it's similar in the way that it affects people. And I think there's a real emotional connection with music that brings people together. Just generally, in any kind of music as well, it brings families together, it brings friends together. There's this saying that, like, it's a universal language, so it can bring people together from anywhere in the world. Every mother will sing to their babies, right? So that brings a mother and child close together. So I feel like music has this kind of magical quality that will literally emotionally connect with humans from every different walk of life. It's like a 3-minute pop song is, whether it's, been out in the world and connected with millions of people, or it's just, a guy that's written a song and his family's heard it and loves it. They have emotional connection to it. I mean, I've been lucky enough that my music has, been out there and millions of people have heard it and have connections to it. There's one particular song, and I say it's like a song with wings, and it's I've kind of like almost, it's not, I've given up ownership to it. It belongs to the people that love it and have their own connections to it. And the other thing about songs and music is that people have their own interpretation, and their own connections are very, very different. I've had people write to me and say it was the first dance at my wedding, or it was that song was on when I met my wife, or there's this really kind of sad story that I get a lot. This happens a lot, where it was played at people's funerals. There was one particular guy that comes to mind, just a memory of how when the one and only came on, it was always known in his group of friends that was his favourite song, and he would always be lifted up in the air, wherever they were, in the pub or the club or whatever, that he'd get lifted up and he'd be like, I am the one and only. And he sadly passed away, this young man, of cancer. And at the funeral, they put the one and only on, and that is when they lifted the coffin up. And those kind of connections, that kind of moment, it's like, wow, that's nothing to do with me. That is all that group of friends and that family and that soul who had this beautiful connection with a song. And it's just interesting to me that how that happens. And some songs have that little extra magic fairy dust on it that just kind of go off and have their own life, as it were.
Well, it's interesting because I know that you've played that song with every genre that you could ever imagine. You've tried a reggae version of it. You've tried
Yes.
I don't know if you've done thrash metal.
Death
with
metal.
it, whatever,
Yeah, I've done that. Oh yeah, but I've got to watch my voice with that one. Oh yeah,
But
that hurt.
how do people react to that? Do some people get upset when you do that?
What, when I change it up?
Because it's theirs.
Yeah. Well, I guess what happens is it becomes sacrilege in a way to some people, because you can't touch the original, It's like you can't there's certain songs by certain artists that you really shouldn't touch, you know? I mean, I'm not sure if I completely subscribe to that, but I guess like Imagine would be one of those, you know, where that John Lennon version is so perfect and his vocal is so raw and so searching and whatever it was. That was fairy dust, the magic fairy dust poured on that particular record from that particular time and that moment.
I think it's connection. That's why it upsets people.
Yeah.
Because if you do this kind of sacrilege and change it, that there's something that connected that specific musical sound.
I think it's like
in a way that they're like, I want that connection. I don't want you to mess around with that connection.
Yeah, I think it's like they don't think that you are allowed to touch it. You see what I mean? It's their connection, and so perhaps I'm going to use John Lennon as an example, but like perhaps there are some people out there that don't know me or don't like me as an artist, don't like my music. That's fine, that's the beauty of it. One man's meat's another man's poison. But because I love John Lennon, and that person loves John Lennon, he and I sit here and play a bit of Imagine. They're like, well, how dare he? How dare he put his take on that classic? And then it's like I'm boycotting, and it's like it's extreme. The emotion is extreme because their connection is so strong that they can't. There's no way that they could let anybody else in with that. It's
like a jealous boyfriend or something.
Yeah, exactly. But then you get the other side of it, where somebody that really likes you as an artist and really likes Taylor Swift, and then I've done a cover of a Taylor Swift record, and they're like, oh, wow, that's amazing to hear a different interpretation by somebody else that I like. So it goes both ways.
Yeah. Less jealous boyfriend, more swinger.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but it also makes me think of that thing of that there's a connection to a time, because I've got so old now that I now will hear music from the 80s and the 90s that I didn't like in the 80s and 90s, and somehow I'm fond of it now.
Yeah, no, I do that as
and
well.
I think it's that I've got a nostalgia for a time.
Yeah.
For some things that happened then. Nothing specific, but there's something to do with that time and that sound. And at when that music was popular, I would have been annoyed if they were playing it in a pub or a nightclub or whatever.
As I said earlier on, you can hear a song, especially songs that you like, I think. I know you were saying songs that you would have annoyed you at the time, but especially music that you like and that has stuck with you. For me, when I hear the White Album, for instance, the Beatles' White Album, it takes me back to that moment when I was really discovering what a beautiful melody is, or what the construction of a particular way of writing, how it comes about. And I've got memories of locking my bedroom door and just lying on the floor and reading the liner notes and putting sellotape across the vinyl, or whatever, as a 15-year-old or something like that, just soaking it all up, and just so those things take me back to my teenage years. There are certain music, and there's my connection with my younger self. So you can have music takes you, there you go, music will take you back to a connection with your younger self in different moments in your life. Like the Nat King Cole will take me back to my wedding day, because Unforgettable was our first dance or whatever, and if I think about Superstition, the Stevie Wonder song, that takes me back to the very first vinyl that I ever held in my hand, that was mine. So it's an amazing thing. So it's not just connection with other humans, it's connection with yourself.
You just made me realise how different our lives were, because I remember being horrified when I first got a record player. It came that Christmas. It also came with a piece of vinyl that my grandfather, apparently, or so my parents said, he just bought what was the number one single of the day.
What was it, the Birdie song?
And so my first piece of vinyl was Kajagoogoo.
Too Shy.
Too Shy.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I did a gig with Lamar
oh my God. Day. And I hated it then. But now if I heard it, I'd probably be
You'd love
quite
it.
happy.
Yeah, yeah. No, I did a show with Lamar the other day. I did an 80s show, and Lamar was there, and there he was singing Too Shy. Yeah, amazing. And I'm actually very good friends with Nick Beggs, the bass player, who's amazing.
Sweet.
Yeah.
That's funny. So most of my connections, because this is where I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable connecting one to one. That's my most comfortable place when I'm connecting to new people, to people I know. I'm just much more comfortable that way. But connecting to an audience, and connecting to that audience without it being like a presentation or a story, I've done that. I've stood up on stage and told personal stories. I'm okay with that. It's more nerve-inducing for me, but I've done it and I've practiced at it, so I'm okay with it. And I understand that it's different. It's a much more a broadcast, and hopefully we put a little bit of polish, so some kind of preparation, some kind of practice has gone into it. So it's different to the kind of storytelling that we do when we're connecting just two people, over a coffee. Yeah. But what's it like with music and connecting to an audience? Like, how much does it change according to what you hear from the audience, the dynamic of it? I mean, what could you tell somebody like me that is completely tone deaf, has no idea about music? What is it that's different and excites you about it?
I mean, it really depends on the kind of show you're doing. Because if I'm playing at a big festival or a stadium or even arenas, it's hard to get intimate. I do try and tell stories, before the songs to explain what I was thinking or what it's about. But the shows that I love the most, when it comes to telling stories and connecting, are the intimate, smaller venues where you can actually see the whites of their eyes. I have since I started working with you and Lynn and doing the storytelling stuff. What it's done for me as a performer is to be more comfortable on stage and talking more. I really do sit there, and sometimes I rabbit on a bit too much, I think. But, I have this thought in my head. My dad once said, my dad was a singer as well, he once said, just imagine you're talking to your mates. You're just hanging out with your mates, and be natural, be you. And so I took that to heart. And now when I'm on stage, I like to kind of just talk and be engaging in a storytelling kind of way. And I do tell lots of stories. I tell stories about my upbringing. I tell stories about the songs, what was going on in my head when I was writing them. And I feel like it helps to kind of like have almost like a prequel to the songs, especially songs that have some kind of emotional feeling towards them. I've got a song called Airplane, which is basically about my son Casey. And I'll tell you the story that I tell before do the song. Basically, when he was about 6 or 7, he used to love playing with paper airplanes. And I was in the back garden with him. We were throwing airplanes around, and he came running up to me at one point, bringing back an airplane. He said, "Daddy, please make me an airplane. I want another one just the same." And it's the way he said it kind of made me like, oh, well, he's rhyming. He's a genius. The boy's going to be a songwriter. I wrote that little phrase, "Daddy, please make me an airplane. I want another one just the same." And I wrote that in my diary at that time. And this was like, now we're talking, 13 years ago or something like that. Now he's like this hairy bloke who lives in my house. And I rediscovered that. I was looking through journals many, many years later, and I rediscovered that little phrase. I never wrote anything with it. And it kind of choked me up because he's not that 7-year-old kid running around playing with airplanes anymore. He's now, in his bedroom and locking the door, and God knows what's going on in there. And, the reason I wrote this song about it is because it made me realize that those little snapshots in time, you have to hold on to them. 1 minute you have a baby in your arms and the next minute they're asking for the car keys. And so I wrote this song, and I say to the audience, those of you that are parents will probably relate more to this one, but this is what I wrote about those little snapshots in time. And so when I play the song straight after telling that little story, I've seen people crying because they relate it to their own relationships and their own children. And literally streaming with tears, especially in the like little intimate shows, because I don't know, it just takes them to those places, those moments in time that they have in their head about their kids. And I definitely directly attribute that to you and Lynn, and, dragging the truth out of me, because we all tell stories that are just stories.
You become as manipulative as my wife, is what you're saying.
Absolutely. I know what works.
I guess in that respect, there's sort of two strands of connection, because there's a connection through the music, and then what you've done is use story as a kind of force multiplier to connect with the story, and then have both of them working at the same time. Because you could just listen to the music by itself and you would get the connection to the sound and to the feelings that evoked. But then when you add to it this kind of verbal story that has conjured some thoughts and some memories in somebody's brain before they then hear the music.
Yeah, it gets them in the right frame of mind to receive the emotion that I'm about to give them. There's a twofold kind of wave where you've got the story and then the music. And you can equate it to like when you're watching a film. Without the music behind the dialogue, especially in an emotional scene, it really doesn't have the same kind of pack, like punch, I should say.
Yeah.
And, scoring is basically what we're doing. So, with a pop song, you're scoring to the lyrics, right? So if we've got a song like that Airplane that I was talking about, which is about an emotional thing, it's about kind of holding on to those moments with your children and stepping back and kind of really paying attention to what's around you right now. If you score it with a beautiful piece of music, then perhaps you're gonna feel more emotion, with it. So there you go. So you're right. It's a twofold thing.
Thank you for that. That's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that with movies and adverts and all of that kind of stuff. The music is always it multiplies whatever the force of the dialogue and the music and the plot and all that kind of stuff that's going on. I know that, what was it, the Levi's jeans, they had one, oh God, I can't even remember what the music is that it does, that really kind of harsh rock, where he takes the jeans out of the freezer or whatever.
Yeah.
Incredibly sort of sexy advert. But without that music, it looks silly.
Yeah.
Like it really does just look like a poncy pretty boy taking his jeans out of the freezer. But then once you add this kind of rock backtrack
Makes
to
it
it,
sexy.
that's all harsh. Suddenly it's like, oh, all right, he's raw and he's mean and he's tough. And
it's almost like music can kind of give you a prequel to how you're supposed to feel, and that's what they do in films. And sometimes it's very, very obvious. Like if you think of kind of like the obvious kind of emotional kind of gushing strings in a big Hollywood film, they're telling you how to feel, basically. That's why for me, the subtler scores are better for me, because they do it without you realizing they're doing it.
Oh, it makes me think of Reservoir Dogs. There's that bit where he's been so horrible in this warehouse. I think he might have even cut the guy's ear off at this point. And then he goes out to the car. The music that he's playing while he does that horribleness, then he shuts the door, goes out to the car to get the can of gasoline. And then the music kind of stops suddenly. I didn't really sort of notice it was playing.
Yeah.
And then it's all quiet where he walks and he's just like a normal guy walking to his car, takes the gasoline, walks back, and then we're back into the music.
But isn't that the genius of Tarantino?
The thing that really affected me, and the thing that really affected me was not in the movie. I mean, that did affect me and I remember that scene. Mm-hmm. But the thing that really affected me was when I was in a nightclub and they played the same music.
And it took you back to that moment.
And then suddenly, I didn't know why, but suddenly I was like anxious. I was like, I felt threatened.
Yeah.
I was like, what's going on?
You were holding onto your ears.
Happy music. I don't understand. Yeah. It's like, what's going on? And I suddenly remembered where it came from and why. Yeah. And then it was all right. But there you go. It's really effective, that.
Yeah,
connection to an emotion.
Tarantino is a genius at that, and apparently he chooses the music when he's writing the script. It's like most movies they will have a music supervisor that kind of brings music after the event. But he makes sure, I mean, I'm sure his music budget for his films must be huge, because he always uses these amazing artists that will probably charge a fortune to have their songs in the film. But yeah, he's a genius at that. I don't think there's any other director that has that kind of foresight, that in just the connection between the music and the scene. He's genius at that. But he's also a real music fan. Like he loves music. Apparently he writes while having music in the background. You know, it puts you in a different state of mind depending on what you're listening to. I do that sometimes. Like if I'm going into a writing session, I'll just have a listen to some Prince or something, and it's like, oh, the juices, it gets your juices flowing or something. And just listening to something amazing. I mean, some people would be like, want to give up when they listen to a Prince song. It's like, oh well, I'm never gonna get anywhere near that, you know. But for me, I'll listen to a beautiful Lennon or McCartney sweet melody, and it just kind of makes me think, oh yeah, now I know where I'm going. I know where I'm going with that, so it just puts me in the right frame of mind.
That's interesting as well, yeah. Because the other one you could be scared of plagiarism or that kind of stuff. But it's kind of set you on the track of a direction of a journey that you want to go on yourself, not...
Yeah, it's a feeling rather than the actual musicality of it. Yeah. It's the feeling that it evokes when you listen to a particular piece of music. I would never sit there and copy the chords from what it is or anything like that, but that, you know, if for instance, I'll put on, I don't know, When Doves Cry or something like that, and it just makes me feel just like warm, and just there's something about it that kind of puts me in the right kind of creative mindset. To be honest with you, it's the same looking at a piece of art. So if I look at some Van Gogh, you know, it's like, wow, that's amazing. And you can see the passion in the brushstrokes, you know, and it makes me think, I want to be creative now. It's exactly the same thing.
Method to get you into flow.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like to get you into that flow state. Is there anything that you would have liked me to ask? Is there anything that I've missed? Have I missed the obvious because we're mates and I'm just chatting with my mate?
No, I think I loved this conversation, Mark. It's actually made me think a little bit more, you know, about my connection with music, like on a deeper level, not just kind of as a writer or a, you know, performer myself. You've got my juices flowing, mate, and that's. I know there's a reason we're mates. So you know, this has been a really lovely conversation, and I think we've hit a lot of really good points about the connections with music, from connecting with your younger self, that was something that was like a revelation to me as I was saying it. I was like, oh well, that's so true. It's not just a connection with other people, which is true as well, but it's also a connection with you and different moments in your life. So thank you. It's been really nice.
Well, thank you. I've really appreciated this. I've loved it.
My name is Chesney Hawkes. Something I've learned or noticed today was talking to you, Mark, about music and connection, and how music can bring a connection between two people. I never really thought about the fact that it actually connects yourself to yourself and your younger self, or to different moments in your life, which is something that I feel like I'm going to start thinking about that a lot more. So yes, thanks for that. My favourite goodbye is see you soon. I like that because it's like goodbye could mean like I'm never going to see you again, goodbye, farewell. So see you soon is like, you know that there's going to be more connection. So I'll see you soon, Mark.
Cool. I'll see you soon too. And if you live in the UK, then you could probably get to see Chesney before I get to. He's playing gigs throughout this summer. You can find out more at chesneyhawkes.com. And specifically, if you're in London at the end of this month, Friday the 31st of May, he's playing the O2 Academy in Islington for a massive gig with loads of support acts, which I'm gutted that I'm not going to get to see. Anyhow, if you do enjoy Connection Requested, please sign up to the email list at connectionrequested.com, and you will get this podcast delivered in your email, and maybe a few emails once in a while. And it always helps to leave us a positive review on whatever podcast player you love best. Hope to see you soon.